Video games over the years have had their ups and downs, and in today's video, we're going to compare video games roughly a decade apart. So hey guys, Matt from Nintendo Extremist, and welcome to my new series where I will, like the intro said, look at game franchises with a 10 years age gap between one another. For the first ever episode of 10 years apart, we have Zelda. The games we are comparing today are Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Phantom Hourglass, and Breath of the Wild. As you can tell, we're starting from the oldest to the newest, so the first game we're talking about is Ocarina of Time. Coming out on the 21st of November 1998, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was released, and before you say,
there isn't a decade age gap between those games,
I told you it was rough. Okay, so starting off with the story, this N64 release is regarded as the best Zelda game in history, and has made such a stance for itself and an impact in the Hall of Gaming. And of course the story itself does not fail to deliver either. So in summary, as this video would be incredibly long otherwise, here is Ocarina of Time's story. The fairy, Navi, apologies for mispronunciation, reawakened Link, the hero of time. The fairy forewarns him of Ganondorf's great calamity. Link must travel throughout Hyrule to preserve the country and Princess Zelda from Ganon's scheme to capture the Triforce, the greatest power in the realm. Link will go on a once-in-a-lifetime adventure to stop Ganondorf once and for all, with the assistance of the Seven Sages and the mysterious Sheik. Honestly, this game has taken elements from its predecessor and implemented it into its own unique story element to create a fleshed out standout Zelda story arc. And it could be possibly argued that games following Ocarina of Time series have taken elements from Ocarina of Time in their own standout adventures, such as Ico's Shadow of the Colossus or even FromSom's Demon's Souls. With the Ocarina of Time story discussed, let's move on. Critics and customers alike appreciate Ocarina of Time's aesthetics, sound, gameplay, soundtrack and story. And it gained several awards and honours, it has been named the greatest video game of all time by various publications, and it is the highest rated game of all time on the review aggregate Metacritic. It was a commercial triumph, with over 7 million copies sold throughout the world. It earned more than 3 times more pre-orders than any other video game at the time in the United States, and it was the country's best-selling game in 1998. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, a direct sequel, was published in 2000. Ocarina of Time was re-released in China in the early 2000s as part of the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition promotional disc for the GameCube. And the iQube player. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, an improved version of the game for the Nintendo 3DS, was published in 2011. Master Quest, an alternative version of the game with more puzzles and greater complexity, is included in both versions. As you can clearly see, Ocarina of Time just had such a stance and impact on gaming, it managed to get many new additions, even a remaster, and there's a good reason for it. If you're not intrigued already, this game is phenomenal, and I recommend you play. With that said, let's move on to the next game. Ten years following and coming out on the 23rd of June 2007 for Japan and in different points of October for the rest of the world, The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass was released. In all honesty, you can count the Japanese as lucky to play the adventure that has the starting setup to the disclosure of the Ocean King's identity, to the ultimate reunification of Link and Tetra. It's not overly dramatic or confusing, and it's timed beautifully. It does a good job of making the "it was all a dream" gimmick appear campy or like a cop-out, which is its only complaint. Captain Linebeck, for example, is one of the game's most memorable characters. He's crusty, grumpy, and egotistical, yet he grows as a character during the game in a manner that supports characters seldom too. Even when he's on his best behaviour, he still has that half scummy, half silly demeanour that draws us in. And this is going to be another mispronunciation. There's Oshus, who physically transforms into a whale, the whole white whale. That's quite cool, honestly. Now you might be wondering why Phantom Hourglass is regarded as one of the franchise's pinnacle titles. After all, most individuals don't have positive memories of it. Many fans regarded the Temple of the Ocean King to be tiresome because you had to rebuild it from the ground up each time you visited. You were there a lot since you had to return every time you finished a dungeon. Even with the shortcut, you discover each time it's an irritation. Personally, I think otherwise, though there's also the fact that the game was mostly exclusive to the Nintendo DS. It was also ported to the Wii U in 2016. Although given how poorly that device sold, Phantom Hourglass didn't get much of a chance to shine there. Though this is mostly a good thing because of how it leveraged the advantages of the DS, Phantom Hourglass is such a great and extremely underestimated game. Some problems, for example, require you to close the device and use the microphone, giving the activities an added sense of realism and depth. These additions, together with the simpler control mechanisms, help to attract newcomers to the Zelda franchise. Of course, these alterations alienated some dedicated long-time fans, but overall they grew the Zelda fandom. Even if it was divided, it helped the series to become more mainstream and identifiable, which is something we can't complain about. This title is for the DS, and considering I think it's pretty amazing and overlooked, in all honesty, hidden gem question mark?
So we're roughly halfway into the video now, so I think it's time to do some self-promotion. Basically guys, we have our very own Discord server, the NX Warehouse, and we want some new members. Being in the NX Warehouse does have its perks, as you can speak to me, Matt, and anyone else in the NX family. You also get to help choose our future videos, what we play on live streams, and it's a brand new game that I've just come up with. If you can accurately predict our next video, you'll win a shout in that video. So if that sounds appealing to you, feel free to join the NX Warehouse. A link will be down below in the description. Back to the video.
Ten years following and coming out on the 3rd of March 2017 for most, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was released across the two platforms, Wii U and Switch. It was the last Wii U game, and this version will not be representative for this comparison. The story for the Breath of the Wild is amazing. Link is sent to the Shrine of Resurrection by Zelda in order to save his and the Kingdom of Hyrule's lives. The princess can use her newly awakened power to set the groundwork for another attempt on Calamity Ganon's life later. This day, unbeknownst to her, turns out to be several years away. It turns out to be 100. This is the basic summary without getting into more spoilers, but the opening of this game is fantastic. And stepping out of the shrine, you are in for some beautiful cinematography. Breath of the Wild is more than a traditional Hyrule dream. It's a difficult survival game that requires you to think in new ways. In order to survive the woods, you must be careful, inventive, and ingenious. Apart from armor, you must obtain everything from the field. You get new weapons by stealing them from foes, and combining items found in the environment to create healing meals and elixirs. Death comes swiftly, and you're forced to reassess particularly everything you've learned from previous Zelda games. Whether it's at the hands of the tough foe, or because you charged unprepared down a perilous road. You never feel like you have control over the world since there is so much to see, do, and learn. This is a fantastic idea. Unlike many other games, Breath of the Wild maintains a thrill of surprise discoveries throughout the game. It's like Nintendo took the base of Ocarina of Time and made it modern. The game's 4 main dungeons are primarily puzzle focused, with only a few enemies sprinkled throughout. They're a bit unusual compared to dungeons in past Zelda games, in that you aren't focused on finding keys to open doors. Instead, the goal is to manipulate the dungeon itself, and somewhat surprisingly, an exploration often proves far more challenging than combat or puzzling solving. Link travels primarily on foot, and he can sprint as long as his stamina meter allows before having to catch his breath. Link can also climb vertical surfaces like cliffs and walls now, but again, he's at the mercy of his physical strength. And throughout the game, you're able to upgrade your health and stamina. There's a lot more to discuss when it comes to Breath of the Wild, but we'd be here all day. Yes, that's really how good the game is, and arguably one of the best titles on the Switch. Breath of the Wild follows the traditional Zelda very unregulated. Aspects of past games do seep through, however the developers made this so unique to the series and take ideas to the next levels. It's time for the outro. It's clear with over 20 years of Zelda covered that the series did not lose quality consistently. Throughout the decades, the 2000s to 10s was an era of Zelda that excelled in bringing a new large audience but caused a lot of division. This, in my opinion, was due to the confinement of the DS and a very vague lack of Zelda content on the Wii. Though popularity only rose during these years and following years, it's clear the Zelda series is not dead, as the new mainline release was just as amazing as the game in the series from 1997, which cannot be said for much other game series. With that summed up, that was the first ever episode of 10 Years Apart. If you have any other games you want me to do 10 years apart on, leave them down below. I'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to join the NX family, and also make sure to turn on post notifications to never miss a video. I've been Matt from Nintendo Extremist, and I'm signing out.